We are live here. Um, it's always hard to tell. So
Hello.
anyway, thanks for joining us again. I keep thinking that we should stop doing these as frequently, but then we get a whole stack of extra questions from people, and so um, I certainly have not minded having this opportunity to connect with people because we're not seeing as many people in person these days. And since the COVID crisis seems to be continuing, we'll continue to do these things. So we have a stack of questions today, Alex. So why don't you, what do we got? Let's see
Yeah,
what
I'll
we got.
start with Janelle.
Let's start it.
Yeah, the first question we have is from Janelle. Just as a background, I know you highly recommend keeping detailed logs of workouts with notes addressing variables both positive and negative. I 100% agree. Do you ever discuss with female clients the potential effects of hormones on their performance? Hangboarding and performance climbing days are when I really notice these fluctuations. Temporary weight gain, emotions, and drops in energy are just a few notable things women deal with monthly. Wondering if this is addressed or ever discussed. Yeah, this is a great topic of conversation. It's also a really challenging topic of conversation because it's ends up being highly dependent on the athlete in a number of hi Janelle, in a number of realms, right? Like how well trained is the athlete, novice or advanced? Do they have an understanding, or have they ever tracked their period before? Speaking about the female athlete, and so we definitely do bring this up just to create an awareness around it. There have been some discussions with people in the past about like building programs around their menstrual cycle. And I've, not to throw Natasha Barnes under the bus here, but her and I have talked a little bit about this at length. And she's got a good handle on the specifics of this and the research behind it, because there's starting to be a growing field of research with menstrual cycles as it relates to female athletic performance. But mainly we're just trying to create an awareness around the menstrual cycle in first just having the athlete track their menstrual cycle if they don't do that already. And that can kind of bring an awareness to the athlete of like, okay, when am I feeling like low energy? When do I feel bloated? When do I feel like I'm at risk during the month of training? And when do I feel the best? And so in creating that awareness, we can kind of like help the athlete somewhat auto-regulate their training throughout the month. Instead of trying to be real prescriptive in terms of like, do this intensity at this time during your menstrual cycle and this intensity in a later part of your menstrual cycle. It's more about teaching the athlete or bringing an awareness to the athlete of what auto-regulating means. So being able to self-identify with like low energy, or being able to say like, okay, I feel really strong today. It's okay for me to train hard. So auto-regulation in that light, and then also bringing an awareness to that. The menstrual cycle is just one piece of the pie in terms of performance and training, and that it doesn't necessarily need to be the end all be all. And so there are lots of studies coming out that are somewhat contradictory of each other, in that some studies find that athletes perform really well in certain phases of their menstrual cycle, and other athletes are the complete opposite. So it's kind of all these contradicting research that's going on. But again, if I'm just to like full circle here really quick, is more about bringing an awareness of the menstrual cycle patterns to the athlete, trying to identify whether or not they have an irregular menstrual cycle, if they have an extreme menstrual cycle, like do they respond poorly to different parts of their menstrual cycle? Do they know specific things about them personally in terms of like energy level fluctuation and emotional fluctuation throughout the menstrual cycle, and then trying to plan according to that. And then again, like it all just varies from athlete to athlete. Some female athletes perform really well when others don't. And so it's all comes down to individualization of the athlete. But again, it's a really good point to bring up, especially for athletes coming in who are looking at higher training volumes or intensities.
Well, and just to add to that, I think all athletes, whether male or female, benefit from having times of lower load training. And if a female athlete can, once every 4 weeks say, okay, this week I'm going to purposefully train at a lower load and make that coincide with a time in their cycle that they're not feeling great, they tend to perform better. And then when we go to these males, basically the way that most climbers go is they kind of go as hard as they can go, and they can maybe go a little bit harder and a little bit harder, and then they get injured or have a layoff for some reason. And so if you can take control of your training and say, okay, this week I'm going to stop myself from going super hard, then I'm going to go a little harder the next week. And many athletes do very well with 3 steps forward or 3 weeks of progressive volume and intensity, and then dropping off from that last week, dropping off by 50% in intensity and volume. And we tend to like to drop volume rather than intensity, but that's super effective for female athletes. So we really do promote that one.
Yeah.
So here's something. There's a question, Alex, that you can take, or I can take it. But discussing overreaching and overtraining syndrome, how to recognize it and how do you get out of it? And so just as a lead in, Alex deals with this a lot because he trains a lot of our elite level athletes. And overreaching is simply like, went really hard this week. I'm tired. I'm wiped out, feeling sore every time I wake up. That is like an acute version of overtraining. Overtraining syndrome is a chronic state where a person has trained into this zone of not recovering, and basically we just keep beating the athlete down without getting recovery, getting their head above water, to the point that their entire neurological system, their entire metabolism, everything else has changed, is down-regulated, so that they feel terrible and they feel sore after workouts. And so some people think that's like, oh, I'm training really well, but we're actually in this really bad cycle, and that can be depression and whatever else. And so, Alex, will you take like maybe both of those? Like, have you dealt with people with the actual syndrome, and then what do we do with overreaching?
Can you say that one more time? You lagged out there for a second.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. What do you do with an athlete that's actually had the overtraining syndrome versus somebody that's just overreaching? They've gone hard this week and they feel crappy.
Yeah. So the athletes that have gone really hard in this particular week and they feel really crappy, we tend to introduce like a recovery week, right? Like what Steve just talked about. We don't necessarily need to drop the intensity of that athlete, but we can just pull them back about 50% or so on what they've been doing for the previous week and say like, okay, we really need to put the emphasis on, hydration, how much sleep you're getting throughout the week. Are you meeting your nutritional needs? Those are the 3 big things that are going to take the cake in terms of, do you have this overtraining or overreaching syndrome? Are you going through the process right now? Or have you just gone too hard this week? And so the first big things that we need to take care of are like, okay, how are you sleeping? And what are the things that we can do to get you sleeping better and longer? And then what are the nutritional values that you're not meeting? And so how do we upregulate your nutritional intake, right? And then what are the hydration needs that you need to meet, right? And so getting the athletes to fulfill those things first is what becomes real important right away. And then we can start tacking on like extra recovery modes in terms of like mobility and some like stretching and myofascial release, and maybe you see a massage therapist. Those are all ways to like kind of upregulate the system, but really we need to take care of the physiological needs first. And then when an athlete comes to us and they go like, okay, I'm broken down, I'm beat down, I don't feel good about myself and where I'm at in my athletic performance, and I don't feel like I want to go to the gym. I don't want to be around other people who are climbing. Well, what do you do with that athlete? And so you try to bring awareness to them of like what they were doing before, how heavy they were training before, you know, and then try to scale that back and push them in a direction of like just bringing an awareness of like, okay, so you were training last month, 6 days a week for 2 hours each day. Let's drop that back to like 3 to 5 days of training, and we're just going to train for like a half an hour each day. And your goal isn't necessarily to perform in those sessions, but it's more to just get you back to a baseline to where we can even start to think about upping the intensity of the training. Because there's this like U-shaped effect when we talk about effective doses of training. And so we really just need to be able to like hit that effective dose of training along your training continuum without overdoing it. Because when you start to get on the other side of that U-shaped continuum, it gets exponentially what's the right word here? Destructive to your performance and your like ability to adapt to the training, right? And so but some just to reiterate, some big ways to recognize that you're either overreaching or overtraining is going to be like fatigue, chronic fatigue, a decrease in sleep patterns, a change in your regular nutritional intake or eating patterns, mood swings, depression, not wanting to do like the normal activity that you do every day. And so really you need to just be aware of what those changes are and how to address them when they come about.
Yeah, and the other thing that I'd add to what Alex said, or just underscore, is that the overtraining syndrome is very much like going into like debt, credit card debt. Like you have to pay back with interest. It's not like you can just back off a little bit and then you're good to go. Overtraining syndrome can take months and months and months of very low levels of activity. And actually intervention from some medical professionals, rather than just like a climbing coach going like, yeah, back off and just go bouldering twice this week. And so if you do get into one of these situations where you can't figure out why you don't like climbing anymore and why you're not sleeping well and why you're gaining weight or whatever, it might be time to start looking at that from a medical point of view. And it's fairly easy to sniff that out. I think for if you go to the right professionals, they're going to be like, okay, wow, look, this guy was training super hard, and now look, he's definitely changed his basic lifestyle habits. And so that's really important. But think about it, like you can't just go out there and go great guns and then back off a little bit and be okay. And just to underscore this point again, is you should only train as much as you will see benefit from. Like doubling the volume of your strength training won't double your results. Doubling the duration of your bouldering session will not increase your power. And so we have to make sure that the proper amount of stimulus is delivered, and then we recover. And if you feel like, oh yeah, I just have to be at the gym for 4 hours, that's a personal preference rather than an actual need from your physiology. And so you need to be really, really careful about implementing stuff that isn't showing you positive performance results.
That's great.
Gosh. Okay. So this one I love our faithful Climb Strong trainees are so good about diving into the weeds. And so this is a good question. Brian asks, we contrast the pros and cons of a training plan that uses 3x5s, 3 sets of 5, with the 5x2 or 2x5 that Steve mentioned in the May newsletter. Yeah, so 3x5s and 2x5s aren't all that different, right? This is just a different set and rep scheme of strength training. And so when we look at anything, and I love the workout volume, any workout volume that has a total number of reps less than about 15 reps, we can assume that's probably a full strength workout. And that could be anything that's like 2 sets of 5, 3 sets of 5, 5 sets of 3, 5 sets of 2, 7 sets of 2. There's a whole bunch in there. And if we're working to where 2 reps is really difficult or 5 reps is really difficult, but still staying under that 15 total reps per exercise, you can assure that you're heavily into the strength zone. And at that point, then you just need to make sure that we're recovering properly in between each of those. And 2x5s or 3x5s, it doesn't really matter. One of the things that's really important that you could do with your training is, if you're doing 2 sets of 5, say I'm doing 2 sets of 5 squats, 2 sets of 5 weighted pull-ups in a workout, and I feel like I'm not making much progress, and I can't, you'll get to a point that you can't feel like you can add more load. One of the mistakes that people make as they try, especially with pull-ups, is they'll kick up to doing more reps. Like I can do 2 sets of 5 reps at, say 50 with a 50-pound weight vest on, but then I can't do it with more weight, and so I'm going to just start adding reps. Well, if we start adding reps, we start leaving that strength zone and going more into an endurance zone or a power endurance zone. And so one of the things that you could do is try to add volume, and that's one of these big values, like with ladder training, where if I'm doing 2 sets of 5 and I want to advance my strength, but I can't quite do it by just pushing load, I can add one more set and go to 3 sets of 5. Then I can maybe go up to 4 sets of 5 or 5 sets of 5. But now I'm building work capacity rather than just strength. And I might not see those numbers go up. But I'll underscore that when we see somebody build up a tremendous amount of volume at a submaximal load, and we love this thing where you have somebody just build volume over the course of 4 to 6 weeks, but holding their load at about 70 to 75% of their max, they get really super strong. And so if you have an older athlete that is, still wanting to stay strong, that's a really good way to train them if you're a coach. Because if I take somebody that's, 40, 50 years old and they're, in the weight room pushing load all the time, there's a good chance they'll get injured. But if I keep them at 75% and then just keep pushing volume on them, they're going to see really good benefits, and they can potentially see good increases in strength, but never going to that risky level. And of course, I love that for hangboarding as well, because the fingers are really prone to injury. But anyway, the difference between 3x5s and 5x2, 2x5s isn't a lot. The 2x5, 5x2 alternating cycle is, and what I was mentioning in reference to this question, is we will do 5 sets of 2 of a set of exercises on day 1. The following day, we'll do 2 sets of 5 at a lighter load, then go back to 5 sets of 2, 2 sets of 5, alternating between those. And so we're doing some load variability in there. And that's really easy on the body, so to speak, as opposed to the starting strength method, which is pretty hammerful. It's pretty hard, and it doesn't give as much recovery. So I think continuing to back off a little bit is going to be really, really useful.
Yeah, that's great. And I think that it's also important to know that, like, those protocols are something that we've all gone through ourselves, including the ladder strength stuff. Like that would be like Steve said, that's going to be one of their go-to methods of improving strength. And it's personally one of the things that I love to do myself. That way I just know, like, I'm not like in an ideal world, I'm not going to get myself injured by pushing that load over time. And seeing personal gains from that is really important, especially to be able to talk about it in terms of experience to others. So yeah. Okay.
What else we got on there?
Endurance at home. Is that something that?
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah, I got a message about this. So there's a lot of concern about people losing some amount of endurance. You know, like you're not out there climbing. Not everybody's locked in their apartment, but most of us are not seeing the amount of time out climbing as we did before. And the question I had was, you know, I'm in an endurance phase. Is there any way that I can salvage this thing? And I can't stand the idea of trying to do a endurance workout on my hangboard. Okay, so here's an interesting thing. Your endurance is, you can look at it as your system, like your ability to, or your capacity to endure activity at all. And then you can look at it in the specific terms of like enduring the ability to climb really hard. Now, specific endurance is built on top of a foundation of general endurance. And what's really fascinating to me is that we are seeing people now coming out of the gym culture that don't have the basic work capacity to even walk to the crag without it hitting them physically hard enough that it affects their climbing negatively. So what I'm saying here is, you know, like at our local crag, Sinks Canyon, it's like a 15-minute walk uphill from the car. We see climbers that will be so tired from walking up the hill to the crag that they have to recover for, you know, 30 minutes before they start climbing. And so what that shows us is the basic lack of capacity in that athlete. And so I'll go back to something I talked about a couple weeks ago, is there's some really good tests of aerobic capacity. And one of the things is can you go at a hard conversational pace, like hiking uphill for 30 minutes without having to stop? You know, can you put your pack on and walk up to the cliff without having to rest? If you are gasping for air when your climbing partners are chatting their way up the trail, one of the easiest things you could do to train is just build your basic aerobic capacity. And you can do that by going for a walk every day. And so if that's the issue, training away from the wall is very, very easy. You know, get on your bicycle, go for a walk, put your backpack on and go for a hike. You can do like body weight circuits, anything to build basic physicality. And that's, you know, for so many of us, it was just assumed because we always climbed and approached and did all these things. You know, when you walk up to the crag 3 days a week, you have a pretty good aerobic capacity, but the gym doesn't allow you that. And so you're going in without any amount of training and just like walk, you know, 100 yards from your car and then start bouldering really hard. And then you go home. And so what we're seeing is that lack of capacity. Okay, here's the other thing. You can improve your work capacity or your general work capacity by simply doing the same amount of work at a higher heart rate. Now, the example I'll give you is this. I have a hangboard in my house and, you know, and a staircase nearby. And so what I could do, instead of just doing a hangboard and a pull-up workout, I'm going to go on the hangboard. I'm going to hang on an edge for 10 seconds, and I can wear a weight vest or whatever, but 10-second edge hang, then maybe do 3 pull-ups and then run up and down the stairs twice. And then I'm going to come back and then I'm going to do the same thing, edge hang, pull up, run up and down the stairs, and maybe do that 10, 12, 15, 20 times. And so I'm building up some good volume, just like I was talking about earlier, good volume at a medium load, around 70% on those fingers, doing maybe 2 or 3 pull-ups, which is probably not close to my max, but after 20 sets of them, it's going to start getting tiring. And then I'm doing it at an elevated heart rate because I'm going up and down the stairs. And so where normally my heart rate might be in the 80 to 100 beats per minute range, when I'm doing those stair laps in between, or you could do jumps or burpees or something, your heart rate is elevated for the work that you're doing with the fingerboard and the hangboard and the pull-ups. And so when you're doing that stuff, we automatically have a greater endurance capacity because we've upticked the metabolism. And so when you're doing those things, right there, we start endurance training at home. And so that's a very, very interesting way of building some amount of capacity. And I know there's like this dismal, like, I'm just going to lose my endurance. This sucks. And I got to rebuild it and whatever. Well, if you're serious about it, you can keep it. You just have to bear down and do the training it's going to take. Converting from a high level of general fitness to a high level of specific fitness is much, much easier than building up that fitness after you get back to the crag. And so you have to do some things that you don't like, but I'll remind you that enduring is not always the easiest thing. And so you just need to buckle up and try a little harder on that. Okay, what do we got here?
That might have hit all the points there.
Okay, yeah. Awesome. That's really good. So yeah, the other thing that I wanted to talk about today is that all of us kind of went into the COVID thing with this mindset of like, oh, okay, I'm going to have a month of not doing anything and that's going to suck. And here we are a month plus, kind of getting into the 2-month range. And that's a long time for an athlete to be in hibernation. And so let's just say, no matter how psyched you were on your hangboard and all that other stuff, we've been doing recovery. Like most of us have been at a recovery level. It's critical now that if you haven't built out your vision for the next 6 to 8 months, that you sit down and do that. You should sit down with your notebook or your spreadsheet, and you should plan out, here's exactly how I'm gonna progress out of this hibernation. You can get very, very strong and very, very powerful at home. You can build a home wall. You can go bouldering outside. Everybody's got a different structure maybe now than they used to have, but that is not an excuse for letting your athleticism decline. If you have to become a parkour athlete or a bodyweight master or whatever, you need to keep that total work going. Getting super strong fingers doesn't take very long, and it shouldn't take very long. If you're on the hangboard 4 to 6 days a week right now, you're probably doing too much of that and too little of other things. And so get your piece of paper out, write down the things that you want to do and the things that are it's going to take for you to get there, because that's super, super critical that you have a clear picture of where you need to go so that you know the steps that you need to take tomorrow and the next day and the next day. And this is one of the things that Alex has been working on really hard with his athletes that are now stuck at home, don't have access to crags or gyms, is like, let's make ourselves better at getting better. And so that's going to be your critical homework from right now going forward, is to have a really good plan so that when you wake up tomorrow and you don't feel like getting out of your pajamas, you actually get up and do something that's going to benefit you when you get back to the crag. We are getting close on our time here.
Perfect.
Oh yeah, Natasha's building a home wall. I saw that. That looks really good.
Yo, creativity.
Yeah. Right, so thanks for joining us. Hey,
thanks everyone.
I wanted to let you guys know that on Thursday, I think Leif Gash at Substrate Climbing is hosting his Facebook Live, and you guys should go check that out. The link is there. I just put it up. And I believe it's at noon. Is that right, Alex?
Yeah, maybe I think so. That's good. Yeah.
But I watched his last week, and it was awesome, and it's totally worth dipping in for 30 minutes and listening to what he has to say.
Mm-hmm. Very true.
All right. So if you have questions, you can email them to me, Steve at climbstrong.com, or to Alex at climbstrong.com. And we will gladly address them next week. It probably won't be Alex and me together again next week, but we will make sure we've got somebody on here that can answer questions for you and help you guys out.
Great.
All right. Take care, guys.
Take it easy.
Train hard.